when stars are in light, the weaver, we would know.
Welcome to another Improving Sales Performance, Sales Leadership livecast. And I am super excited to have Scott Sutherland, who is the SVP Market Manager for Bonneville in Phoenix, as our guest today. Scott and I have known each other for 20 years, I think. Forever.
Together.
Yes, exactly. And we're going to dive in, and we're going to talk about some of the really important issues, some of the really important sales leadership discussions that market managers are having with their sales leaders these days. If you are joining us live, go ahead and feel free to leave a comment. And if you have a question, you can ask those questions. I think we see these in live time. We might be anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds delayed, but if you have a question, feel free to leave it. And if we see it in time, we'll try to respond to it. But if not, I always go back and comment on the comments or the questions. Also, if you happen to be watching on YouTube and you enjoy the show, if you could like, subscribe, share, set an alert, all the things that you're supposed to do when you're watching on YouTube. But again, that is if you like the content. And do us a favor, tell people about it. I mean, the reason why we do this is because we want to provide value to people that are in sales leadership and have good conversations. So if you know someone that you think might benefit from listening in on these 20, 25-minute conversations, please share the link and help us to spread the word. We really, really appreciate it. All right, so with that, let's dive in and hit some issues. And like I always do, I'm not scripted, but I am prepared. And I did write out my questions in advance. So Scott, first of all, welcome. Glad you could be here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I know that Scott's dealing with some AC issues. He's in Phoenix, where it's always beautiful, always hot, but beautiful. And we're dealing with some AC issues. So if you're hearing a little noise in the background, that's a fan. But Scott's a trooper, and so thanks for still sticking with us. So Scott, from the market manager point of view, from your chair, from where you sit, what are the things that you look at specifically in the sales department that lets you know that things are on track? Maybe a better way to say this is, what are the key performance indicators that you can't check everything. So what are the 3 to 5 things you look at?
So I guess my general answer to a question like that would always be, how are we doing controlling the areas that we control, right? And that's not a new adage. And I think, to me, when you really think about it right now, I think the pandemic gave us that answer, and because, we know that Some stations had benign effects from the pandemic, others had malignant effects. So when you look at the characteristics of the stations with the benign effects, what were those? I would say local business with access to decision makers. I would say business with tied to specific KPIs. I would say local business tied to custom needs-based solutions. I would say over-indexed in digital composition, so you're diversified well, maybe over a 20%. And I would say categories would be category diversification. Anyone living in a bunch of auto in 20 and 19 are getting hammered right now. And so I think those are the areas that, and I think it also proves that what we've been saying for the years isn't in vain. And then you look at the stations with the malignant effects, basically Avail Nielsen-based business, probably over-indexed on national and under-indexed on the category part. And I think those are, to me, that's the interesting part of coming out. And I guess the answer to your question, those are the things that we always look at. What can we control, whether it's, and not so much direct, because I think that's, some people take agencies whether they can't, but just the essence of the control business would be what we look at.
Yeah, so that's a good way to think about this for anyone watching is make a list of the things that you can control. And probably a shorter list is better than a long list. And then really just look at those and say, how are we doing in those areas? If you're winning in the areas that you can control, then pretty much things are going to be okay. If you're losing in the areas that you can control, you're going to have some issues.
And think about, Matt, the salesperson that is 112% of budget, but didn't, when you look at it, they really didn't do all that much. They may have got some things that flew in. And then there's the other person that's 93% and everything that you would ever want. Target account activity, control business, high digital comp. And what are you going to say? Keep grinding like you are, it's coming. And I think it's the same thing that we look at, because there's so many things that are outside of our control.
Yeah, I had a sales leader tell me yesterday that the definition of superstar has changed. And where in their business, and they were outside of media, but in their business, what superstar meant was whoever was billing the most. And that they're under new leadership, and the new leadership has come in and said, whoever's billing the most is certainly important, but there's other things that we're going to look at, kind of like what you're saying. Who has the most controlled business? Who is the highest over budget, right? Who's exceeding expectations, not who's billing the most, because the person billing the most might not be exceeding expectations. They might not be at budget. And it was just refreshing hearing this sales leader say, we've reset expectations and we've told everybody, number one biller might not be the superstar anymore. It will be the person that is over budget. It'll be the person that is doing the type of activity that we know is the most important activity. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And from a company of Bonneville with 6 markets, we don't have a lot of scale. So there's not a lot of group deals going down that we participate. So basically we have to make hay, in the local world. And so that's why the control rules, are so important to us.
Yeah. So let's talk about the sales managers, and Bonneville, like all the companies that we work with, has everyone has sales managers. That's a middle management job. That's probably the toughest job in the building, is being a middle manager. You and I have talked about that before. It is a hard job. There's so many things for them to be thinking about. What are the top 3-4 things that a sales manager should be thinking about these days?
I think one that we've spent a lot of time on, if sort of the poison, if you will, in our business is retention. If we lose 30% of the business, how can we all do a better job on the key account attrition? And I think some of that structure that I know that we'll talk about it at the end of this call, but I think that's where strategically, if we can lose 17% of the business and not 30, we're making hay. So obviously that's a big area we focus on. Target account development, again, when our whole world, specifically here in Phoenix, is the local revenue and digital. If we're not doing well in target account land, then we're going to get killed. And then recruitment, and I think it's probably the hardest it's ever been right now on the recruitment front. And I think our strategy has been, at least for the last 5 years, is to get back to where sort of we used to, and train. We've hired the last couple of people. We've hired people right out of school. Our managers do an unbelievable job. We built a training program with you, and I just think the recruitment is so hard, and we're really trying to get out of because I think it does an injustice to our industry of just hunting the person at X company and they get Y. And I think, and not to sound like we haven't done that, of course, but it doesn't help. And so what we're trying to do is really focus on the recruitment. So for us, those are the big three, I think, that our folks are focused on.
Yeah, and I think to just go a little deeper on what you just said, I think sometimes managers, they try to do too many things, right? And they forget that these are really the things that you just articulated. Those really are the big rocks. I mean, if you can do those things, if you can reduce your attrition rate, bring it from 30 to 25, 20, you can focus on target account, new business, new revenue, bringing in the new keys, and you can do a better job with growing, training, and recruiting the very best people. You're going to win. You're going to win way more than you're not.
Yep. And I think the irony of our industry has changed so much, but the fundamentals haven't. And I think that's where it's more complex, certainly. But I think that the core fundamentals, have and will always be there.
So let's talk about a little bit of that change, and let's still focus on the sales manager, because this is the sales leadership podcast or livecast. How has their job changed? Like sales manager from 5 years ago versus sales manager in 2021/22.
Yep. I was thinking when coming out with you and John to work on the impact leadership. And by the way, I think if there's anything that illustrates the complexities of being a sales manager this day, you just look at the specific duties in the 4 Ps. And honestly, sometimes you feel bad. You're like, how are we supposed to have someone focus on all 4 of those quadrants and all the duties that are associated with them? And then, again, back to why the sales manager is the hardest job in our industry, because then you have the gotta minutes, so deal with the 4 Ps and make sure that you're worried about key account retention, target renewal, recruitment, and now you have to deal with people in and out of your office all day long. And I think it's just much more sophisticated. And I think that the digital products, I think have made that job more complex, where instead of where you're focused just on audio, they have to deal with all the audio solutions. We have publisher sites, so there's a lot of O&O digital that our folks have, and then all the third-party digital assets, and then you need to manage performance and make sure budgeting is right, and get into Salesforce with CRM issues and make sure that our inventory is there. It's almost an impossible job.
Yeah, it really is. You mentioned the 4 Ps. For those that are not familiar with impact, that's people, process, planning, and performance. And also the virtual gotta minutes. So what I have noticed is this: when everybody was in the office all the time, the gotta minutes were a distraction, but they lasted 5 minutes.
Yep.
And it was someone popping by your office saying, "Hey, you got a minute? Let me run this by you. It was good interaction. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, done." Gotta minutes in a virtual world or a hybrid world are 30-minute scheduled Teams or Zoom meetings on your calendar. And when they still really probably only need to be 5 to 10 minutes, they now get blocked for 30 minutes. And it's not uncommon when you speak to a sales manager that they have 9 video calls a day lined up. There's no time for some of the other stuff that's really important. It really is a challenge, and I know you're seeing that too.
Yep, without doubt.
So, as a market manager, an SVP, what guidance do you give to your sales leaders? Do you say, listen, these are the things that you ought to be focusing on. Don't get distracted by all the other.
Yep.
Key account retention, target account growth, recruitment, training, those are the areas.
Exactly. I mean, back to the start. It's all, again, what can we control and how are we doing against what we control? Or what are the controllables?
Yeah. So if you were speaking, let's say, to a group of sales managers, and you were asked, and I said, Scott, give these folks, and these are not rookie sales managers, but these guys aren't 40 years in the business either, right? Old and slow. These are carnivore sales managers. And I said, Scott, give these guys some advice on what they should be doing or learning about right now.
Yep. Well, to me, the one that we're spending a lot of time talking about is how do you maintain human connection in a hybrid world? And I think, and I wish I had the answer to that, but we're really trying to figure out, because you mentioned it, you no longer have 10 minutes of, how you doing, how are your kids, how'd the soccer game go in wherever. And I think we're, are we losing some culture? Are we losing some, are there morale issues? Not morale that they're, malevolent people walking around, but morale sitting in your home office. And I think that's a biggie that we're trying to figure out. How do we possibly maintain that? What does the new order look like? So retention, it was, at least when you have people in your office, you're building connection. There's trust, there's communication, there's transparency, things that naturally come when you have, in-person connection, and it's hard. So I think we can do a lot there. And I think, the pointed one, the obvious for the sales manager is digital acumen. I mean, if our sales managers aren't up to speed, and obviously, they don't know how to write code, they don't need to know how to write code or manage an exchange, but they do need to know, again, the products keep coming and coming. And I think that's an area that they must invest time, whether they get IAB certified, whatever they're reading. But I think that's an area that, to succeed, to stand in front of a group and say, I need you to sell SEM or what else, you better have some credibility there.
Yeah, they better know what they're talking about, right? Sure. They better. So the two things, and I think this is really, really important, so I want to go back to it. The two things that I heard you mention that sales leaders should be focusing on getting better at, improving your game in these areas, would, one, being intentional about culture, being really, really intentional about what's going on in the organization, because a lot of what everyone certainly in the broadcast industry benefited from is everyone came into the office every day. So culture was really established around the water cooler, so to speak. And so being intentional about that. And then the second thing is really understanding your digital capabilities and not only what you're capable of doing, but how it helps the business that you're selling it to. Like, how do you get results using your digital capabilities? All right, so last question, or last kind of topic is, I want you to look into the future, 3 years, 5 years, not 30 years, 3 to 5 years in the future. Tell us, what are some of the changes that you think will be happening in sales departments? Like, I'll give you some 4 examples. 5 years ago, hardly anybody had a CRM in the broadcast business. Today, we're starting to see it. 5 years from now, probably everyone's working. What are some of those things? Will we be structured differently? Will we have B2B marketing? Be more intentional about culture? Will we be hybrid? Will we be back in off? What do you think? Give us your prediction.
So I would say that that the sales structure in our industry is definitely problematic. I think it's archaic. And I think it holds us back. So that if I had to double down on anything, and I think that speaks to, it was 5 years ago that we were in that conference room, and I just remember the sort of the facetious frame up that we had, where we literally said, if we hired McKinsey and Company, right, is there any chance that after 12 weeks they would come back to us and they would sit us in a room with a PowerPoint presentation and they'd say, God, I love what you guys are doing with sales structure. It is the best thing in the world, and it's awesome because it hasn't changed in 27 years. And the best thing about it is your AEs get to prospect and do CNAs, and after you get back from the call, write the proposal, but send it to the sales assistant, right? And to make sure that they can slap some graphics on it. And by the way, we love the fact that you have one sales assistant for 10 AEs, and then you get to get into our systems and write and all the things, and then you can write copy, right? Which I say, 95% of all AE written copy begins with a question. This summer, are you in the market for a Chevy? And so then you deal with the post sale and you deliver tickets. But the best thing about your structure is that the AEs, no fault of their own, drive home on Fridays and they say, man, oh man, was I busy? This is awesome. And then only they were busy doing everything else except sitting in front of a customer doing discovery meetings or asking for money. And so to me, that's where we've spent the most time over the last, 5 years, really doubling down on it. The last year and a half to implement account managers, because I think that's the single thing, in my opinion, that holds us back.
Yeah, you and I have, obviously we spend a lot of time on this subject, but if you look at all the things that you articulated that the salesperson is responsible for doing in the current structure that most organizations are implementing, and you identify the ones that are selling responsibilities, right? Like doing a discovery meeting, presenting a proposal, negotiating a deal, closing business, right? Those are things that a salesperson, a hunter, really has to do. And then you do the analysis of how much time are they really spending doing that? Even though at the end of the week, to your point, they're going home and they're like exhausted from all of the work they did. But how much time did they spend doing that? It's not much.
It is the fatal flaw, I think, in our industry, how we're set up with sales structure. I mean, look at the digital, we've copied the sales or the sports teams. I mean, they always have where the salespeople sell, but they're also, it's a strategic role. It's on the strategic side. All of the tactical has to be, and the management of accounts has to come, which we think is on the account manager side.
Yeah, the way I've seen someone describe it is, there's a couple of different variables that influence how successful a business will be. But a couple of them, when it comes to the sales department, is hire really, really good people. Check, got that. Hire talent, good people. Second is give them a structure and a process that will set them up to succeed. And so when you look at your organization, it's like, okay, well, do we think we have good people? Okay, if we do we have a 21st century sales structure? Do we have a 21st century sales process, or are we still using the stuff that the guys back in 1988 were using?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the challenge is, with all due respect, as I get it, a lot of the people that use the old structures that we're talking about will point and say, but Matt, Scott, I made a lot of money in that old structure, and it was good. Our company had a lot of revenue, and salespeople make a lot of money, and they're not wrong, but the world has changed.
Yep.
Right.
If we had someone really focused on the account management side, and I had our AEs, not dealing in some of the administrative things, would this help our retention rate?
Right.
I think it would. I mean, so we're growing 1% to 2%. What we're using the same structure with a lot, and we already went back to what we're asking our sales managers to do. That's exacerbated when you ask the AEs are doing the exact same thing. And so if we don't change, I'm not so sure how, what changes, frankly. It's because it's probably going to be 1% to 2% to 3%.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, I've enjoyed the conversation. I always enjoy catching up with you. This one was on camera and focused. We'll continue to have lots of conversations like this off camera. If anyone wants to get a hold of Scott, you can connect with him on LinkedIn, and I know Shay will put that up there. You can connect with Scott directly on LinkedIn, and he'd be happy to answer any questions or visit with you and talk strategy and all this stuff. And then next week, we're going to have a little programming change next week in the sense that we won't be doing this on Tuesday, but we will be doing this next Friday. We are going to have Bernie Weiss, who's the president of iHeartMedia multi-platform group. He's going to be on the show, and he's got a brand new book out called Ace It. And it looks really, really good. I think it comes out, I think next week is when it comes out. And so we're fortunate enough to have him on the week the week comes out. We'll get him to tell us all about the book, and that'll be exciting. Scott, thank you so much. Shay, thank you so much for producing. And I know that you're dealing with weather where you are, Shay, so I appreciate you hanging in there. Everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you later.
Thanks.